Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome you to this special broadcast. We are coming to you live out of the Monarch Hotel in Rosebank in Johannesburg. And the reason why we are here is we are talking with Yusra Ghannouchi. She is a Tunisian researcher and commentator, PhD from the School of Oriental Studies and African Studies from the University of London as well. But what is extremely relevant is she is the daughter of Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, the co-founder and leader of Ennahda, which is Tunisia's largest political party, where 2 years ago, he was actually made the victim of tyranny in Tunisia. And also at the same time, what this actually ushered in was an era of hope at that point in time. But also since then, we've seen how the country is actually degenerated into, once again, despotic dictatorship. And also, I think for many of us who are familiar with the Ghannouchi family, her sister, Yusra Ghannouchi, has been featuring very, very prominently, particularly in the last 20 months or so with the genocide in Gaza. But what we intend doing this morning is to unpack some of the issues with regard to Middle Eastern politics, but also at the same time, focusing on why this is absolutely important, this is crucial to actually highlight the plight of Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, who has been imprisoned in Tunisia. So, Yusra, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wonderful that you're able to join us, and it's great to see you in our country.
Thank you very much. It's my first visit to this beautiful country, and it's a great pleasure and honor to be here. It's a country that my father had visited many times, mostly before the revolution, at the time of our own struggle for freedom. And we were always inspired by South Africa's own historic struggle for freedom against apartheid. And that's always been a source of inspiration and hope for us, particularly as, you know, my father was a political prisoner many times. And here, you know, there is a long tradition of political prisoners with, you know, President Nelson Mandela, Ahmed Kathrada, and all the political prisoners. So, you know, it's great to be here in this great country.
Well, certainly. And also, I think what you're saying is absolutely important, because when one talks about your father, we know that he had very, very strong views, and he still holds those strong views, particularly looking at the common challenges that we all have faced on this continent, colonialism, the effects of colonialism, the lasting effects as well. And these were views that he had actually held for a very, very long time. But also at the same time, looking at his position as someone who featured very, very prominently in the political landscape of Tunisia. And before we get into specifics, just to provide us with an overview in terms of his political vision. I know he's about 83 years
Yes.
now, you know,
Yes.
but again, you know, in terms of his vision and what did, you know, Tunisia and the African continent actually mean for him.
So, you know, my father's engagement in the struggle for freedom, you know, goes back to the 70s, when they founded the Islamic Tendency movement in Tunisia, which was fighting for more, you know, political participation, the ending of one-party rule in Tunisia, as well as at the time there was a persecution of religious expressions. You know, hijab was banned. There were a lot of restrictions on on religious expression because it was seen as a sign of belonging to the Islamic movement, which represented the main challenge to dictatorship. And you know, that developed and evolved to Ennahda Party, which continued to struggle for democracy and against dictatorship in Tunisia. And for that, my father was imprisoned multiple times in the 80s, and later he was in exile for 20 years in London, in the UK. And we continued the struggle against dictatorship, and he continued to promote the compatibility of Islam and democracy, and human rights, diversity, pluralism, women's rights. He continued to promote all these ideas, and eventually the revolution, happened in 2010. After decades of accumulation of struggle and sacrifices, and with the efforts of Tunisians from all walks of life. After that, my father returned to Tunisia, and he led Ennahda Party in the first free democratic elections in Tunisia's history in 2011, and Ennahda won those elections. Then Tunisians focused on, just like in South Africa, after the end of apartheid, there had to be a new constitution and the building of a new open democratic system. That's what was done in Tunisia. So there was a new, very progressive constitution that guaranteed separation of powers, guaranteed independence of the judiciary, independence of the media, freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and all human rights, and was recognized as one of the most progressive constitutions in the region and in the world. However, we won't go through all the 10 years after the revolution, which saw ups and downs, because no transition after decades of dictatorship can be easy. As you know well, in South Africa itself, it's an ongoing process. So the transition had its ups and downs, but the difficulties of the transition were exploited by counter-revolutionary forces and by populism, which used, the final straw was the COVID pandemic in 2021, and the difficulties for the economy, etc., were used to dismantle all the progress that had been done. So the president at the time, who had been elected in 2019, used the difficulties to suspend the constitution, suspend parliament, and my father at the time was the Speaker of Parliament, the elected Speaker of Parliament. Parliament was suspended on the 25th of July 2021 by the president, who claimed that Tunisia was facing some imminent danger and that he was going to step in and save Tunisia. And my father went out on the same night of these announcements by the president, although he had just suffered from COVID and he had just been in hospital for 10 days. He went in front of Parliament, which was blocked by a tank by the military at the orders of the president. And my father said, this is a coup against democracy, which we will not accept, and we must return to a democratic process. And for that, he became a target of the persecution of this coup. Obviously, not just himself, anyone who stood against the coup and criticized the actions of the president, who did not stop at suspending parliament and government and the constitution, but went on to suspend all the institutions we had built after the revolution, the Supreme Judicial Council, the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Constitutionality of Laws Temporary Commission, and all the democratic institutions. And through the takeover of the judiciary, he managed to turn the judiciary into a tool of persecuting the opposition. And that is how my father was arrested 2 years ago on the 17th of April 2023, which was the 27th night of Ramadan.
Yes.
Just before iftar, just as he was getting ready to break his fast, our family home in Tunis was raided with, over 100 security officers who raided the house, searched the whole house, and took my father with them. He did not break his iftar and spent that night sitting on a chair, and we did not even know where he was. He was accused of inciting violence, based on statements that he had made 2 days before that at the headquarters of the National Salvation Front, where he was meeting with other representatives of other parties and civil society who were against the coup and trying to work together to build a united front against the coup. And he said that Tunisia needs everyone, needs leftists, liberals, secularists, Islamists, and should not ever think that anyone could be excluded. Those words were taken out of context, and he was arrested. And since then, multiple cases have been mounted and fabricated, all politically motivated. We have no trust in the judiciary in Tunisia, and my father actually is boycotting all the process, the legal process, because he knows the decision to arrest him is not based on anything legal. It is a political decision. So he's boycotting the hearings, but he has been sentenced in 3 different cases. The highest was 22 years in prison. And he's currently 83 years old. He's turning 84 in a few days. So this is, clearly there's a will to, exclude him and punish him for his central role in the transition to democracy in Tunisia. And this is not just for him. There are, many from the party and from other parties in Tunisia. But they are continuing to defend freedom and defend the democracy we have built in Tunisia. And this is why we are here in South Africa once again, as an African democracy that we can learn from and seek support from.
Well, certainly, in fact, there's just so much you've said, Yusra, at this point in time. And if I think back, having covered the Arab Spring, there was just so much hope at that point in time. It all started in Tunisia, was the removal of Ben Ali, and then it mushroomed through to Egypt, Hosni Mubarak, and what you're describing in terms of what has happened to your father and how the economy was actually used after COVID, and one can actually draw parallels to what had actually taken place in Egypt as well, with Mohamed Morsi as well, where the economy was actually used. But again, I mentioned that your father obviously was a visionary as well, and he had a long-term vision for what our Arab governments need to look like. But again, in terms of aligning his views in a secular democracy to political Islam, and perhaps you'd just like to expand a bit on this in terms of his vision, as far as political Islam is concerned, and how secular democracy actually can align itself with Islam and Islamic values.
Definitely, in all his writings, as well as his actions before the revolution and after the revolution, there's a clear commitment to this vision of a society that respects and recognizes diversity, that manages the pluralism of in society, not through repression or violence or authoritarianism, but through embracing that pluralism and managing it in a system that includes everyone, does not exclude anyone, where everyone participates. And my father's writings have always emphasized that these values are universal values and Islamic values. They are not contradictory with Islam. In fact, this is the system that Islam promotes. Not in the details, the details of a political system, election, separation of powers. Those we can, be inspired by anything, invented by humanity. Islam is open to adopting those mechanisms. But the values of Islam, of shura, consultation, diversity and pluralism and participation of everyone in the management of public affairs, those are Islamic values, and these are the values that are reflected in the constitution in Tunisia, that everyone contributed to writing. Sadly, that's now been torn apart, and we have a new constitution in Tunisia, but the struggle for freedom continues in Tunisia, and these values are also values where my father believes we can be inspired, and we share these values with others, particularly in our continent, who share the same commitment to freedom and democracy. And that's why he's always been inspired by the South African model. And he visited South Africa many times, and he always saw it as a source of inspiration, of hope, of how a society can be diverse, but can be cohesive and can be inclusive. And that is the only basis for prosperity. He was always certain that coups and dictatorships and authoritarianism can never lead to true prosperity and development. And the other aspect where he always drew inspiration from South Africa is also in the field of transitional justice, where Tunisia after the revolution had to deal with decades of human rights violations. And he emphasized that just like in South Africa, there is a great need for reconciliation and forgiveness rather than revenge and retribution. And that's something that we try to do in Tunisia.
Well, talking about revenge and retribution, and I think you touched on a very, very critical point here, because what we find, Yusra, also is despotic rule. Dictatorship has been a hallmark of many an Arab nation for a very, very long time.
Absolutely.
And this is not only unique to Tunisia. We've seen it in Egypt, we've seen it in Syria. And also, I think what was horrific is, and I'm sure you are very, very concerned as far as the condition of your father at this point in time. We know what had happened with Mohamed Morsi. We've seen recently with the fall of Bashar al-Assad as well, the notorious injustice system. I wouldn't even call it a justice system. The prisons and the horrific images that had actually come through. How big a concern is it for you personally and also for your family?
Absolutely. This is what, we are told that this is how the region should be, that we should accept that our region is only ruled by dictatorships and through human rights violations. And when the Arab Spring began to shatter this and to say that democracy is possible in our region, in the Arab world, in the Middle East, in the Muslim world, obviously we faced a lot of attempts to obstruct this transition and the change towards a democracy. A lot of change had been made, and that's why, over the 10 years after the revolution, there were no political prisoners in Tunisia. And now, sadly, we are back to that. And, my father, who was a political prisoner before the revolution, in his 40s, now at the age of 83, something we would not have imagined after the revolution, he is back to prison under, completely unjust and fabricated accusations, particularly because of his age and condition. We are, very concerned about him. He insists, however, that if this is the price that must be paid for freedom, then he is willing to do that. He, as I said, he's boycotting the legal farce, but he is using his time in prison. He's always optimistic and positive. He believes that a Muslim should always be hopeful, should never lose hope, and should always be positive wherever he finds or she finds himself or herself. He is trying to write as much as possible, something that maybe he could not do because of all his being Speaker of Parliament and head of a political party. Before his arrest, he's trying to write. He is reading a lot in prison. He is also using his time to continue the struggle against dictatorship. He has engaged in hunger strikes from prison, and he is following what's happening, particularly in Gaza. He has written many times letters from inside prison, most recently on the 2nd anniversary of his arrest, on which he continued to emphasize the same struggle and same values for freedom and an inclusive democracy, and also send a message to the heroic people of Gaza who, despite all the massacres and genocide and suffering they are going through, they present us with an example of courage and hope and commitment to freedom, which was the same we had seen in South Africa. He's continuing the struggle, and you mentioned what happened in Syria. That was also another source of hope that oppression can never last, even if it's supported by foreign forces and huge repression. In the end, Bashar al-Assad's regime fell, and we saw the triumph of the struggle for freedom in Syria. And my father believes that that will happen, even if our march to freedom had been obstructed. We will return. It will resume, and inshallah, freedom will prevail.
Well, certainly. Yusra, what is it that the Tunisian regime fears most as far as your father is concerned? And the reason why I am raising this issue is, I've followed Arab politics and the political landscape in the Arab world for a long time. And when one looks at countries like Egypt, for example, in even the Gulf states as well, we know Egypt, the Ikhwan, the Muslim Brotherhood, featured very, very prominently. And that ideology is one that they fear in countries like Egypt, in Jordan, in the Gulf states, to the extent that the Ikhwan has actually been banned. And when one draws, again, parallels or comparisons between your father's views and what the Ikhwan is at this point in time, political Islam, how fearful is someone like Qais Saidi of political Islam and the views that your father holds, and personally for him, obviously these could have serious consequences.
Definitely. I think Qais Said, like other dictators, what they fear the most is someone who is committed to democracy and someone who is able to unite others and work with others. And that's the model that Ennahda represented, and my father. Both before the revolution, Ennahda worked with other parties to oppose dictatorship. And after the revolution as well, you must know there was a coalition government, and Ennahda repeatedly said that regardless of the election results, we must work together, particularly in a transition. You can't have majoritarian democracy in such a transition. You need everyone to be involved. You can't have just one party ruling and others in the opposition. And that's why the first post-revolution government had liberals and leftists and Islamists. And that's the spirit that led to the adoption of the constitution that was voted for by 94% of the Constituent Assembly at the time. That's virtually everybody. It wasn't the constitution of one party or one section of society. It was for everyone. Everyone could see themselves in that constitution. And that's the spirit that Ennahda and my father continued to promote. In 2013, there was also a major crisis in Tunisia. And the way we overcame that was through national dialogue, for which Tunisia was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And that was difficult for some to accept, even sometimes from our own party. But my father continued to emphasize that, particularly in a transition from dictatorship to democracy. And I think South Africa went through something like that after the fall of apartheid, the emphasis on the need of everyone to work together to establish something that reflects everyone, something that represents everyone. And even now, after the coup, that's what we continue to do, to say that despite the difficulties with our democracy, it was not perfect, the democracy that was built after the revolution, but to fix it, the solution is not to destroy it and have dictatorship. The solution is to fix the problems of democracy by engaging in dialogue that does not exclude anyone. And that's what Qais Said fears, because dictators work through dividing society, using one against the other. and co-opting some and excluding others. But what they fear is everyone uniting together for a common goal. So I believe that is why Qais Said has sought to imprison my father, because of that's what he represents.
Yes. Yusra, looking at the history of Tunisia and obviously the legacy of colonialism and French colonialism in particular, do the French still have an interest as to what is happening in Tunisia under Qais Said, and also as far as your father is concerned, and political dissent in general in terms of how it is actually being responded to?
Absolutely. We know that in our region, dictators have been supported by, foreign powers who believe it's, it's easier for them to deal with dictators rather than someone who represents the people, because they fear maybe that will affect their interests in those countries. So before the revolution, we know that Ben Ali was presented outside Tunisia as, a successful president, and Tunisia had an image of an economic miracle, which we all learned after the revolution was just propaganda. Tunisia had poverty, inequality, and all these problems, but outside Ben Ali was promoted because he was repressing real democrats. He was promoted outside Tunisia, and during the revolution itself, if you remember, France offered him support to crush the revolution. After the revolution, we hoped that Europe and the rest of the world would have learned their lesson, that dictators cannot provide stability or prosperity, and that they should give up this illusion that dictators should be supported to avoid instability. And this is, we were open to building equal relations with everyone, including France and Europe and the US and the rest of the world, as well as increasing engagement with Africa and with other countries. But unfortunately, there was not so much support for the transition in Tunisia, despite statements that welcomed the revolution. There was not enough support that Tunisia needed in that transition. And sadly, now we see a repeat of history. So after the coup, which was certainly supported by external powers, we see that there is not a single word about the human rights violations in Tunisia, about the dismantling and destruction of democracy in Tunisia. Instead, we see a return of support to dictatorship. So Qais Said, for instance, has been supported because he is presented himself as a guard of European shores to prevent the hordes of migrants from using Tunisia as a route towards Europe. And this is we know this is an aspect that Europe is now focused on, migration, because of the rise of the far right and its obsession with migration. So Qais Said, instead of being condemned for his coup against democracy, he has been presented with photo opportunities and visits and financial support to play this role of stopping migrants from reaching. And if you have heard, I don't know if you heard, last year, Qais Said made this despicable racist speech in which he used racist language and echoing the racist great replacement theory in Europe. So he said that sub-Saharan migrants are part of a plot to change Tunisia's identity and make it purely African and not Arab, which is all very alien to Tunisia. Tunisia has always been open, has not had, this, a racist problem, is an Arab and African country. Exactly. But we don't know whether that was a nod to, far-right governments in Europe, but it seems to, have worked. But it has led to the rise of racism in Tunisia, which is unprecedented. So those who are in Tunisia, whether as workers or students, or whether those migrants who are using Tunisia as a route to reach Europe, they have been facing really horrific conditions, including death and rape at the hand of Tunisian security forces. They have been, thrown at the borders with Libya and left to die. And this is all, a repeat of the same attempt to get support from Western powers to say, if you support me and turn a blind eye to my authoritarianism and human rights violations, I will serve your interests. And sadly, we see that Europe and many in the West have not learned the lesson from history that dictatorship can never provide stability or prosperity.
Absolutely. Just looking at how fragile this government of Qais Said is at this point in time, and also looking at it from Tunisian society in terms of how they've embraced government. Now, I know a lot of repression takes place, and as you mentioned, human rights abuses right across the entire board. But just looking at Tunisian society and where Tunisian society is right now under this dictatorship, Yusra.
That's a very important question, because we must admit that at the beginning of the coup, Qais Said had some support because of the, perhaps the unmet expectations after the revolution. People thought that, the economy will flourish and unemployment will disappear, and poverty will disappear, inequalities will disappear. And although a lot of progress was made on the political side and establishing a democratic system, on the economic front, although there was some progress, it was not enough to meet people's expectations. So there was some support for a populist figure that comes and says, I will come and achieve all your dreams if you let me destroy democracy. And some people were convinced by that, as well as some political parties and some also civil society organizations and others who turned a blind eye to the coup, thinking that this is just going to affect one party only. So at the beginning of the coup, there was some support, but we can see clearly now that the president has managed to lose all that support. So there is not any political party, any major political party that supports him. In the elections, the successive elections, so-called elections that he has held, whether parliamentary or presidential, the turnout was less than 10%, a record of abstention in the world. So the claim that he has any support is now, belied by reality. So I think this has been positive in a way for people to learn that transitions are not easy, that things cannot change overnight, that democracy, however imperfect, should be fixed rather than thrown away. So I think more and more people are realizing this, and the opposition is uniting around this demand for re-establishing democracy and then working together to face the economic problems, etc. And that's why Qais Said is now cracking down on all the opposition. However, obviously the situation is very difficult. The economy, which Qais Said said he has come to fix, has got worse. Tunisians are facing the highest level of inflation ever in their history. The shortage of basic goods, which never happened before, even electricity and water cuts. Unemployment is increasing. So people, are learning that dictatorship is never the answer. Coups are never the answer. But obviously, this is reflected in a loss of hope in among young people, for instance, who are trying to leave Tunisia, searching for hope and dignity outside. But there is also, as I said, there are efforts to restore democracy, and we hope that will prevail.
Yes. Also, just coming back to your father, what is the latest in terms of his condition? And I know you mentioned that he is writing extensively as well. But again, in terms of contact, who is in contact with him? What is his state of mind? What is his condition, physical, health-wise as well? How is he holding up?
As I said, my father will be turning 84 this Friday. So because of that, and obviously, health conditions and the prison conditions, we are worried about him. I'm outside the country, have not been in contact with him since he was arrested, so for more than 2 years. My mother, who is 75 years old, has seen him once only because of the visiting conditions imposed that are very difficult and humiliating. And my father has requested direct visits rather than the short over the phone and with barriers visit, and that was only granted once, and then after that denied. And my father has refused the humiliating visiting conditions. So my mother also has not been allowed to see him, although she is in Tunisia. She is only allowed to deliver the weekly clothes and provisions and food. As I said, he's trying to remain as positive as ever, and look at the opportunity in any situation, trying to read and write. He believes that his imprisonment is a political decision and will only be overturned by a political decision. So he does not have much hope in the legal process. And that's why we outside are trying to work through the media, through raising awareness of his condition and that of other political prisoners and the situation generally in Tunisia. We are also trying to seek justice outside Tunisia. We have cases at the International Criminal Court, as well as the African Court on Human Rights and People's Rights, against the Tunisian government by a group of families of political prisoners, because Tunisia is a member of this court and is bound by its decisions. We are also trying to work through promoting my father's ideas through the publication of his books. We've recently had the publication of translation of his book called On Muslim Democracy by Oxford University Press. And we have discussed this as well here with civil society organizations to organize seminars and conferences and publications to promote these ideas, which we believe are still important and still needed. So we are trying to focus on whatever little we can do, and waiting for the situation to change.
Yes, but also the message needs to go out loud and clear to the international community, and his plight needs to be internationalized. Like we've seen in the case of figures like Nelson Mandela, for example, as well. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons why you are here in South Africa, is to highlight his plight, but also to send a strong message that this is happening under our very own noses on the African continent. And, the African Union, politicians in Africa, heads of state, civil society organizations, and all of that, the awareness needs to be created, because it's been pretty low profile at this point in time. And hopefully through this visit, Yusra, this obviously will be the start or the beginning of something bigger in terms of securing freedom for your father.
That's what we're hoping. I agree there are strong parallels between our struggle for freedom and the historic struggle for freedom in South Africa. The example of South Africa gives us great hope and inspiration, and that's why we have come here. South Africa as a democracy, I believe it can do much to promote democracy in Africa. I think what's happening in Tunisia and the assassination of the hopes for democracy in Tunisia is staying on the whole continent. What happens in one country affects other countries, as we saw with the Arab Spring and the uprisings in 2010. Tunisia's uprising inspired so many around the region. So our countries are not separate. Our struggles are connected. And also we can see with what's happening in Palestine now. We see that it's not dictatorships that came through coups, in Palestine's neighbors that should be putting an end to this genocide. It's not those dictatorships that are doing anything about the genocide. In fact, they're not just silent, they are preventing even popular expressions of solidarity, as we saw with the recent convoy of solidarity that was trying to reach Gaza through Libya and Egypt. So those dictatorships are, complicit. And we see it is democracies like South Africa that are able to do something to stand up for the respect of international law, for struggles of freedom. So the struggle for democracy is not limited to one country. It is all connected. And that's why we're here. And we hope this will be the beginning of greater engagement, inshallah.
Well, Yusra, I must say it's been most absorbing, actually, and an absolute pleasure, actually. In fact, I'm actually elated at having this opportunity, because this is an issue that is very, very close to our hearts here at Salam Media as well. And this is the reason why we're promoting humanitarian journalism, but also in terms of your father, his plight as well. It's something that we have been following, and hopefully, as I mentioned, this is the beginning of something much bigger. In terms of taking the struggle, in terms of making sure that his freedom is actually secured and he earns his rightful place in Tunisian society, his vision to be realized as well. So that's been an absolute pleasure. And just also, I think, looking at it from a media perspective, hopefully the media will latch on to this discussion that we've been having as well, and getting that message out very, very strong, very, very loud, and a very profound message, to the rest of the world, to the rest of the continent, to the rest of people in this country as well, that we have a genuine issue that we need to obviously look at, we need to take forward, and we need to embrace this as our own struggle as well.
That's my hope. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'd like to thank also everyone I've met here in South Africa who have been very supportive and inspiring. I'd like to thank also South Africa generally for the moral leadership it has been demonstrating in the world. So thank you very much.
Well, shukran, jazakallah for that as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum.
Yusra Ghannouchi with us this morning, and once again, I must say, most absorbing and diving into just so much detail, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we were able to uncover, but and unpack as well. But hopefully, this is the beginning, and definitely you need to watch your space right here on Salam Media. It is a campaign that we will embrace, and this is just the beginning, just to provide you with an introduction as to the plight of Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi. We will continue, inshallah, but for now, it's been an absolute pleasure being in the company of our listeners, our viewers on the various platforms of Salam Media. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.